UAS. I suppose you all do. Maybe if you do know it, raise your hands. UAS. Nobody knows it. UAS stands for University of Applied Science, and maybe there are different times of abbreviations. So I will maybe short explain you the education system as we have it in Switzerland. First, what we have is we have what you might call a Tier 1 university, what can be abbreviated as Uni, we call it in German. Then we have got the University of Applied Sciences, that's where I come from. And then we got the teacher training colleges. What is mostly happening is if a person who is 16 years old, usually this person takes a decision. Either she makes a grammar school, so this is what we call in French la maturité, Maturität in German. So these other people usually go to the universities, and that's in Switzerland only a tiny minority of maybe 20%, depending on the location. In Germany it's more, but not as few as in Switzerland. These are the people who learn a profession usually right away. So they go out and they learn mechanics or engineering, whatever they want. But the University of Switzerland provides them with the opportunity to move on to university afterwards. So what they can do is called a maturité professionnelle, you can call it a professional grammar school. These are the people who then can learn on the profession. They usually go to school, they always have to go to school, and later on they can go to University of Applied Science. That's where I'm coming from. And last but not least, we have got the teacher training colleges. Now, e-learning in Switzerland has a history, and the same applies from Germany too. Maybe I can start. It's the e-learning. The history starts a bit early, around '98, when the parliaments of our countries, so both in Switzerland and Germany, they came to the conclusion: maybe there is something we miss on the internet with education, and they started huge programs about e-learning. One of it in Switzerland was called Swiss Virtual Campus. We are a very small country, so we had one program for all the universities. And Germany, they had several programs, such as Pakt Lehre and lots of names which could be repeated here. So the focus of our paper is we look now at our two universities who started with professional training. We have rather small classes at the beginning, so maybe 30 people, sometimes 120, but rarely ever more. And we had on-site teaching. So the professors were on-site and taught their students on-site, and we wanted to look at what do they do with e-learning now. What is really happening with e-learning in our universities? And we wanted to do this on the front of these big programs, which were done by our countries, from 1980 onwards, where they really spent million and million of money for e-learning projects and infrastructure. That was the time we had computers before, but they invested only for, let's say, teaching efforts in e-learning. So the focus of our paper was we just went to our universities, we looked at the learning management system, and we spoke with all our professors, with the students, in order to see what are they learning really. And we classified our findings in two categories. One is top-down. So what are the things which work in e-learning, let's say, at the whole university level, and one is bottom-up. What are the small things which we can find with different professors at our respective universities? So this is today, actually. So basically it means if a professor speaks to a student, still makes the lesson in the classical way, in an auditory, it did not enter this survey, but if the professor used internet in a more or less innovative way, we took account of that. So what did we find? First, on the top-down level. And we wanted to find best practices. So what does work and what does not work in our cases now. And first, one thing which we think is what worked is if a university has an e-learning strategy. Both of them had one, but they are not really went through it with it. And the problem is that e-learning has both a structural component and a strategic impact. This goes up to the buildings. So, for example, if you use a lot of e-learning, then, of course, you do not have to build any big lecture halls anymore. In our case, we are now making a new university campus, and the way how we invest all this money for this new campus is completely different just because of the presence of e-learning. And also, it doesn't have a lot of sense if you have big lecture halls, for example, or a lot of teachers speaking to a lot of students. That's the usual thing which you do not do if you have a lot of e-learning, of course. Then, the second thing which we found, which we thought also good practice, in our case, if the university has a team of specialized e-learning experts, that helps. The problem is that many of the teachers are not very aware about the tools which they have, so you need to give them some help. And this help usually does not mean that they just can delegate this task. They have to do it themselves, but it's good if they have somebody whom they can ask. Then, the university has a learning management system. This is now common practice in both Switzerland and Germany. Almost every university has it, I suppose also in the United Arab Emirates. In our case, it's all open source software. And there is one finding which we find: if the whole university uses the same, which is not the case in all Swiss universities, if they all use the same learning management system, so within one university, this is a lot of help because students do not need to adapt to different interfaces. So we force our professors to use one learning management system in both these universities, and this helps a lot. Last point, another point is the university offers flexibility to its teachers so that they can organize the lectures in a new way. Here, the problem is that in the big projects which we have been doing in the past, e-learning was seen as an add-on to on-site teaching, just something more. This usually did not work out. The only projects which remained were the ones when e-learning was integrated into teaching. For example, teachers skipped their on-site lectures and then they directed their students to learning content somewhere in the internet, and then they discussed this in the classroom afterwards. Then another point, also on the level of the university, is about evaluation systems. Here we had the problem, and we still have it, that teachers are paid according to their hours which they teach. This is an old system. This system is the best system if you want to kill e-learning, because what happens is whatever is innovative in didactics, these people they have to do in their free time. Usually they simply will not do it. So here we had to free them a little bit so that they get time which they can invest either on-site or online, and that helped a lot. Also is the evaluation of teachers. Here, in both universities, a thing helped a lot, and these were the evaluation of lectures by students. So what happens is, whenever a course is finished, students have to fill in a blank, and they say, did I like the lecture? What did I learn? What else should I have learned? Was it good? Was it bad? And this helped a lot with quality management, especially if you are changing the didactical setups. So these are the things which we recommended in our case, which helped us a lot with the implementation of e-learning. And last but not least, the university should invest its money in structures and not in projects. This simply means don't make big fancy technological things, hire some people who help your teachers, and this can work out well afterwards. Then maybe from the bottom up, what did we find? The short message is we found a lot, but not always what we had expected. One thing is, we found a lot of e-learning content being used. I mean, it's amazing. In Bern, the 84% of the professors are now using e-learning in one way or another. What usually happens is these people make their lives easy. They link their, they use YouTube videos. They sometimes contribute to Wikipedia articles, have their students going there because they're there anyway. And we see some kind of small things happening anywhere which change the way how people lecture. Usually for a good way, because we can tell this because we got these lessons evaluations. We also have to say e-learning has failed in a lot of cases, both our universities, as in Switzerland and Germany very often. So we have had many large projects, a lot of money invested in a lot of bells and whistles in technology and interactive solutions, and now 5 or 10 years during the weekend and in the evening, and have to come only on Saturday morning to meet the professor. So e-learning might help with new challenges also, and we, of course, can also conclude that the use of the learning management system can now be considered as basic standard. So, if you want to put things together and just categorize the observations, we see that many things work, but the strategic dimension is largely lacking. When we look at our two universities as they are now, we have to be honest. Sometimes we do not really know what to do with e-learning. And this sometimes is a bit of a problem with respect to how to motivate the teachers to do a bit more in a technological manner, but it works. The second point is there are interesting developments, and here we see a lot of simple things. I call them small or simple things that work in e-learning, such as the integration of YouTube videos, for example, the example which I've made before in the lectures, or small things, for example, the mathematicians, they all use, of course, tools for their formula, and with the engineers we found a lot of small simulations which make the teaching effort much better. So many things work, and usually these people on the bottom, they know what they want to use and why. And time is short now. I'm an e-learning veteran, and we always used to say that you cannot take exams at home. I had to correct my view. Now it is possible to examine people at home with very tough examinations just because everybody has a webcam, so you know what they are doing. We have got oral exams in both universities happening at home, and we have also essays where these people write the essays in front of the computer, and the teachers then sees if it's coming from the student or not, because everybody has his own style. So technology is changing rapidly, and it is offering new ways of doing business, and it actually is even better than the old way, because you always got this webcam movie which allows you to see if the guy or the girl has cheated or not during the exam. So a lot of surprising new things. And last, the environment changes. I mean, it's amazing when you look out about what is happening, for example, in platforms such as, we used to publish on that recently, such as YouTube, where you got, for example, last week we made a lesson about mathematics. It was differentiation, and we found 16,000 videos about this subject. Most of them were more or less good. So the amount of content which is structured and which can be found out there is growing at an immense rate. And this challenges also our way of teaching, because we have to take that into consideration, because these people, when they come out to the labor market, they will work with this information, with this content, and it also forces us to change our learning goals. It forces us to change our teaching methods and everything which we are seeing out there, and that's what we see happening from the ground up every day now. I come to the final recommendations. I will make it very short now. Don't invent, look for the de facto standards and best practices. So if you want to have e-learning work, there are a lot of things which work out there. I recommend even going for the cheap, small things, open source solutions. Don't be afraid of that. Look for the simple things that work. That's the very same thing. So small, low threshold things work very well. And last, we think about didactics. We were surprised to see how many solutions out there are still not very well done. Lots of interactive questions which were not very well done. Could be better. Lots of lectures